let me just play a little clip, and then I want your response.
Okay. Now, you've called for repealing women's right to vote, which is protected by the 19th Amendment.
Right.
Why?
Because it's a good idea. No,
a lot of women wouldn't think so.
A lot of women wouldn't agree. Right, but this is one of my favorite questions now too. Mm-hmm. This is not an XXXY chromosome issue. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want women voting as individuals.
Yeah. So he goes on to say that we're a long way from this sort of thing. So can you kind of just remind us the strategy that he's employing here?
Yeah. So earlier in the interview, before she specifically asked him about women voting, she said, "I'm a Muslim woman. And so would Muslims effectively not be able to worship publicly and have calls to prayer and that sort of thing?" And he says, "Well, of course you can do whatever you want in your home, but we need to understand that this is a Christian nation, and in the public sphere, the United States would be a Christian nation." So he effectively said, yes, we wouldn't have public calls to prayer and things like that for Muslims because that's in the public square and we would not allow that. But then, so he says the crazy thing, basically.
Yep.
Muslims, of course, won't be able to practice publicly. Then he neuters it by saying, but of course, we're generations away from that. We're not going to do that right away. This is a very diverse country right now, and we won't be able to just come in and force that on people. We're going to have to win people over and evangelize. And so it's going to take a lot of time to accomplish that. But then he repeated, but absolutely, we would have a Christian nation with a Christian constitution. And so he said the crazy thing again. And the whole point of that way of speaking, whether it's Joel Webben, who we highlighted last week, or Doug Wilson, is to say the crazy thing and then tell the hearer this crazy thing isn't really something you need to worry about because it'll take us ages and ages to do it. Maybe it'll never happen, so you don't need to worry about that. And then say the crazy thing again to force the listener. It's an indoctrination tactic to frame the crazy thing with, oh, they'll never do that. Oh, that'll never happen. They also do this another way by having someone like Mark Wayne Mullins say the crazy thing. We're going to close all blue state sanctuary city airports and pull CBP from international flights. And then Mike Johnson comes along and a reporter asks him about that. And he goes, well, I haven't heard anything about that. That's just not something, I'm a busy man. That's not something I have time to think about, which is another way of saying, oh, we'll never do that. You don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
So they do this multiple ways. And I want more Americans to be aware of how much indoctrination we are all subject to by listening to how these people talk.
Yes. And thank you for being the translator. Like I'm not fluent. I'm definitely not a native speaker, but I see these sentences and I'm like, oh, now I see what's happening here. And so, in that same interview, he says, he talks about how he wants a Christian nation where non-Christians can't hold office. And it's like, we're going to have to rewrite the Constitution to make that happen, except he calls the current Constitution a work of theological genius. He says he loves it. He loves the Constitution, and all of the change can only come through, years of persuasion and evangelism and mass conversion. He insists that all of this is not violent. This is not a violent project. And he notes that, he's been preaching this for 40 years. And finally, he's so glad that it's getting a hearing, right? So
this is the same man who believes in Christian soldiers and spiritual warfare. And
yes.
taking spiritual warfare into the public square as actual warfare. So that it's not a violent thing is bullshit. And him saying that is another form of softening the crazy thing.
That's right. And yeah. And I want to play just a little bit more of this interview because it's such a central piece. This is like, if I was teaching a class, you show the example and then you discuss the, right. And this is where we are. So this is, it's really an incredible glimpse into this, everything we've been talking about over the past year. So let's talk.
Made it clear that you want a Christian theocracy.
Yes.
In this country. You've declared yourself a Christian nationalist. What would that look like in the United States?
It would look like fluffy clouds and unicorns, and everybody would be happy. That's my vision.
That's your vision.
What it would look like in practical terms. Mm-hmm. I would want basically the same constitutional framework that we have now. I love the U.S. Constitution. I think it's a work of theological genius.
So what's happening here?
This is a long-standing argument from the Covenanter movement, which I would say Doug Wilson is a part of. So for those people like me, many Americans like me probably didn't even know what the Covenanter movement was. So it is a movement that started in 1861 by a group of essentially white Christian nationalists in Pennsylvania. It originally was a resolution that was passed by a Presbyterian church in Pennsylvania that declared that our Constitution was flawed because it did not state overtly that we are a Christian nation and did not make the one true Christian nationalist God the center of our laws and rule of law. And it was pushing for an amendment to the Constitution that would declare those things, that Jesus Christ is the head of, the church, the country, that our laws come from white Christian nationalist interpretations. And they were not as concerned about slavery. Now, this was 1861, and they believed that the Civil War was a result of this flaw in the Constitution that excluded Christ and Christianity from the Constitution. So they were proposing amendments to fix that flaw. And they believed that the Civil War was a result of God judging a nation for not including him in the Constitution. How familiar does this stuff sound? I mean, they never changed their tune. And I can't believe that we can go back 165 years and still find them saying this stuff, this same stuff. And we've never stood up to it and done anything about it. So they believe that slavery would resolve itself if we corrected the Constitution and amended it to make it a Christian Constitution. This group still exists. They are still pushing for these changes to the Constitution, even though they've morphed and changed somewhat over the course of 165 years. But that is essentially what Doug Wilson is wanting here, even though he puts a little charming, Santa Claus type of charm on it, Aw-Shucks. I love the Constitution. It's a great theological document. So that's a pivot from the original Covenanters who called it a secular abomination.
Right.
So,
the pivot, just a little pivot.
Yeah.
So when I wonder about this, and just kind of pause on this for a second, but the Santa Claus bullshit is, his like, oh shucks, I just want what's best for everybody, right? Does he really believe that this world would be so happy and wonderful if everyone had to follow and conform to his own very specific and relatively niche construct of the world? Does he believe that this is a path to happiness, or does he believe what's going on in his brain?
Doug Wilson is a narcissist.
Yes, clearly.
So Doug Wilson defines happiness according to whether or not he's happy. And as long as he's happy, he doesn't care how the rest of us feel about it. He, of course, doesn't see himself as a narcissist and would be able to, with Aw-Shucks charm and whatever he pulls out, he's very good at that stuff. And a lot of these people are.
Yeah.
And so it requires us as Americans to constantly question what we value and why we choose to listen to certain people over other people. I'm not the most erudite person. I rewatch our videos and excoriate myself for saying, 10,000 times in them. I have all kinds of verbal tics. There are people who can come on here and be a lot more a better screen presence than me. And our value of that kind of thing ends up elevating people like Doug Wilson.
Right.
So we have to constantly, as Americans, ask ourselves why we're listening to somebody talk.
Yes.
And why we're giving them the ability to persuade us with their presentation. Because Doug Wilson has learned over 40 years how to do that very effectively and how to rejigger himself for whatever audience he's speaking to. He would do that interview a different way if it weren't NPR.
So it's funny because, when I watch that, when I watch his interview, if I didn't know better, and you in the audience are going to come at me for this, but it is soft, right? It's a soft delivery. It makes me feel almost like, oh, well, he seems like a nice guy. And I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying, like, describing what Andra is saying, what you're saying, Andra, that this is the delivery that pushes us closer and closer to that dramatic vision. And let me continue this this interview just briefly. We'll watch it in clips to show you exactly what the vision is, because he doesn't not say what he wants. So watch this.
The things that would change would be things that would be at the statutory. Some would be constitutional amendments, or they might be dealt with other ways. I'd want to see abortion outlawed everywhere. I'd want to see Obergefell overturned. I'd want to see no-fault divorce rejected, overturned. Things like that.
So no same-sex marriage, no abortion.
No same-sex marriage. No. I'd like the LGBTQ plus thing to go away at the legal level. In terms of
there would
law.
be no legal protections for LGBTQ plus folks.
Correct. There would be no special carve-outs for them, right?
And here's where he says the thing, and he's about to soften it. So check this out.
I believe that LGBTQ plus people have the right to think what they think and say what they want to say, and I don't want to prohibit their right to express their views. So that's not. I don't believe in a priori censorship. I don't believe in restricting, persecuting people who think differently. I think religious minorities, for example, in a Christian republic, should have civil protections.
But you would want to make it illegal for them to be in partnerships. You would want to restrict what they could do in their bedrooms.
And now here's the term.
You mean like
LGBTQ
sexual partnerships, like marriage? Yeah. So I don't want legal recognition of those relationships. Right.
That's it. And that is the strategy. That's the whole strategy. Here's the scary thing I'm going to tell you about. But it's not that scary. I don't believe in persecution.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason we're talking about this now, because, well, let me ask you this. Why was there no podcast like alerting people of this movement 165 years ago, other than the fact that there were no podcasts 165 years ago? What was there a movement bumping up against this? Was there an effort to push back on these people? Because I don't know of one.
Well, obviously, they've never accomplished their goals. So throughout our history, there have been groups who have pushed back. I would see the suffragist movement, for example,
Sure.
as something that would be pushing back against that. I would see Theodore Roosevelt's changes that he made to push back against monopolies and in the original golden age and a lot of the government corruption as pushing back on some of that. They would fall prey to, just like we are today, whatever brighter, shinier object or set of objects was capturing the public's imagination at that time. And throughout history, we have been told, and this is a construct on the left as well, that we can't criticize Christians, that we can't call them fanatics, that we can't point out how radicalized some of them are, that we can't treat Christians that way, that they have a right to whatever they want to think. And they do. I agree with that. But I have a right to call them radicalized crazy people and try to get more people to understand how radicalized they are. If I had been sitting in that interview with Doug Wilson, and I wish more reporters would ask me how to prep for these interviews.
Yeah.
I would have asked him, when he said, I don't want to persecute them, I would have said, define persecution. What does that mean to you? Because forcing people to follow his interpretation of the Bible is correct and right and just to him. That is not persecution to him. But forcing a person who loves the same sex or understands that the body they were born in is not the body that represents who they are as a person, forcing them to not live that truth, to them is persecution. So I would want him to define, well, I don't want to persecute people. Well, what do you mean by that exactly? Define persecution. If you're going to say that these people can't exist legally, how are they not justified in seeing that as persecution and oppression? Explain that to me. That's the kind of stuff I would do to him if I were questioning him. He'd never talk to me because of that. No. But, I wish more reporters and journalists would ask people like me how to prep for those interviews and how to catch those things when he says them, because he gets away with this softening because they let him, because they don't know how to say what you're doing right now is an indoctrination tactic that is training everyone who's listening to you to think, oh, well, they'll never do that. And I'm not going to let you get away with that.